For the past 8 months, this M135i has been my everyday car. That's why it's filthy. But this is no normal M135i. We've been modifying it, we've been upgrading it. So I'm going to talk you through everything that we've done to this car. We've also brought along an M2, same basic platform, same basic engine, but a real M car. So how close have we got to building a real M car out of the M135i?
Last summer, we bought a 30,000 mile 2012 car for £17,500. Today, prices start at around £14,000. Working with BMW specialist Birds, we've upgraded the car over a course of a few months. The first modification we made was to the suspension, binning the standard BMW equipment in favour of I-back springs and Bilstein dampers. The new suspension is built to Bird specification. It isn't just off the shelf. We also fitted 10mm spacers on the front axle. Next, we replaced the open differential with a Quaife LSD. At the same time, we also fitted a short shift kit and modified the clutch pedal. Finally, we remapped the turbocharged straight six engine. The car is now in Bird's B1 specification. The whole package of upgrades cost £6,643.
Those are the upgrades that we've made, those are the modifications. How do they actually make the car feel? Right, let's start with the engine. Standard, it's about 320 horsepower, and now following the remap, it's 390 horsepower with about 420 pound-foot of torque. So it's a good uplift in power, a massive uplift in torque, and you really feel it. One of the things that I really love about the remap is that it hasn't fundamentally changed the character of the engine, so it's still got good throttle response, it's still got good linearity. The turbo starts boosting nice and low in the rev range, and then it's got good energy at the top end, just like the standard car. You just have more of it. So if you put your foot down in 5th or 6th gear from 3000 RPM, you feel that muscular torque just really pull the car much harder than the standard map does. And then right at the top end, get down to 2nd gear, right at the top end, there's a ferociousness to the power delivery. So the car feels much faster, but there's also more character, just because there's more power, more torque. We've also made a couple of minor modifications to the gear shift. It's got a short shift kit on it now, so it's a much more direct, much tighter gear change. The standard car can be quite wallowy, quite vague. This is lovely and tight. This car's also got a clutch pedal modification, which makes the pedal itself heavier. That's really lovely on a quick drive like this one, but when you're in traffic, driving through town, it just feels a bit heavy, a bit unnecessarily heavy. And the differential, so it's a Quaife limited slip differential, it makes a huge difference. It's a massive improvement over the standard car. So the standard car, as it comes from the factory, didn't have an LSD, it just had an open diff. Now the problem with that is that because even the standard car's got lots of power, when you get on the power away from a corner, particularly if you've got the traction and the stability control off, all that happens is the inside rear tyre just lights up. Now, with this Quaife LSD, when you get on the power away from a corner, the diff bites and it sends the drive to both wheels. And so you get much better traction for one thing, much better drive away from the corner. But also, if you stand on the power really hard and both wheels start spinning up, you know the car is going to slide. And then it's very controllable, it's progressive, and you simply choose the size of the slide with your right foot. Overall, having that diff in there just makes the car much more satisfying to drive, less frustrating, and more controllable. It's a really good upgrade. The spacers on the front axle, just quite little 10mm spacers on the front axle just to widen the track width a little bit, make a good difference to the steering. It feels more positive now. Finally, the suspension, the biggest upgrade we've made to this car, the first upgrade that we made as well. The spring rates have actually gone up slightly, about 10%. But what they've done is taken a lot of rebound damping out of the dampers. Now, rebound is the speed at which the wheel can drop out of the arch, having been shoved up there by a bump or by the car leaning over in a bend. So we've got more spring rate, and that does mean that particularly at low speed and on a bumpy road, There's a little bit of edge to the ride quality, that's true. But by taking out that rebound damping, what you're allowing each wheel to do is to roll through potholes, roll through sunken drain covers, rather than crashing through them. And that really improves comfort. But this car isn't about a limo-like ride quality, a very cushioned ride quality. It's also not about being super stiff and super hard for the track. It's fast road setup, really. And where it really starts to work beautifully is on a bumpy road when you're driving at speed. That's when you feel how brilliantly the suspension is working. The body is kept well controlled, certainly much better controlled than the standard suspension did. On the standard suspension, the body would float around, the rear end would corkscrew, it would get loose over undulations and compressions, and you had no confidence in it. Now, the body is much better controlled. You also feel how well the suspension is working to keep each tyre pressed into the road. And only when the tyre is pressed into the road can it generate any grip. So what you find is that you've got much better body control, you've got more consistent grip, and as a result, you've just got more confidence. So what we're left with is a car that's very usable, but it's faster than a standard M135i. It's got the diff, so it's more fun, it's more controllable, and the ride and handling balance is much better sorted. I think it's a very good car, this. But I wonder, how does it compare to an M2?
Well, it feels faster than an M2. It isn't night and day, but the M135i has a more muscular mid-range and it rips harder right at the top end. But the M2 has better traction. It has less power and torque and slightly wider rear boots, so of course it does. And whereas the M135i is now on fixed rate dampers, the M2 still has a comfort mode. That means it has a more settled ride quality in normal driving. The M2 also has much wider tracks front and rear, which means it steers more positively and it feels more planted in corners. On a bumpy road though, the M135i shows it up. Whereas the M2 skips along a little, the M135i breathes with the road surface. The suspension is beautifully damped.
So there we go, it's faster than an M2, and in some ways it's better to drive as well. But you know what, I think the M2 is a great car, particularly this facelifted version, which is much better controlled over a bumpy road than the previous one. So overall, yes, you probably do still want the M2. It's the proper M car, isn't it? It's got those wide arches, it looks fantastic, it's got a better cabin. But you know what? You can build one of these M135i's to full B1 specification, and it's a faster car for half the price of the M2. That's almost all you need to know, isn't it, really? It's half the price of the M2. If you can afford the M2, then it's a great car. It really is. But if you can't, like me, for half the price, you can have a very, very good approximation of it.